Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I do want to let you know that this program is being recorded. Thank you for joining us for tonight's special conversation with acclaimed author Nina Schuyler in discussion with writer and journalist Frances Dinkelspiel. To begin, I'd like to share our land acknowledgement. The San Francisco Public Library acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who were the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. As uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. Tonight's program is presented as part of San Francisco Public Library's One City, One Book, celebrating the worlds I see, curiosity and exploration, and discovery at the dawn of AI by Dr. Fei-Fei Li. Each year, One City, One Book invites all of San Francisco to read and explore a single title together, and to join in citywide conversations around the ideas that shape our world. In that spirit, tonight's event offers a related exploration of storytelling, memory, and the creative forces that shape how we see and interpret our world. Nina Schuyler's novel Afterword, winner of the Foreword INDIES Book of the Year Award for Science Fiction and Literary, invites us into a rich, layered narrative that blends emotional depth with a keen awareness of how memory informs identity. Nina Schuyler is the author of In This Ravishing World, winner of the 2025 PEN Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Award, and finalist for the Northern California Book Award. This collection also received the W.S. Porter Prize and the Prism Prize for Climate Literature. Her previous works include The Translator, shortlisted for the William Saroyan International Writing Prize and winner of the Next Generation Indie Book Award for General Fiction, as well as The Painting, a finalist for the Northern California Book Award. Her best-selling craft books, How to Write Stunning Sentences and Stunning Sentences, a Creative Writing Journal, will release new editions in January 2026. Her stories have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and recognized with Best Microfiction 2025 and Best Small Fictions 2025. She taught for 17 years at the University of San Francisco's MFA program and now teaches creative writing for Stanford Continuing Studies. Joining her tonight is Frances Dinkelspiel, an award-winning journalist and author who co-founded Cityside, the nonprofit news organization behind Berkeley Side, Oakland Side, and Richmond Side. Her reporting has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, San Francisco Chronicle, Daily Beast, and People. She is the author of 2 nonfiction bestsellers, Towers of Gold, a San Francisco Chronicle bestseller, and Tangled Vines, a New York Times bestseller. And now I'd like to welcome Nina and Frances on stage. And then before we begin the conversation, Nina will share a reading from Afterword, giving us a glimpse into the novel's atmosphere, characters, and the delicate interplay of memory and storytelling that defines her work.
Thank you so much. I want to tell you Afterword, just briefly, it's about Virginia, who is a female pioneer in artificial intelligence, who brings back the voice of her beloved. He begins to do alarming things, and Virginia has to decide whether to keep him or kill him. Here's the opening. I just thought it'd be best if you got a sense of the story and the opening of the book. Every morning when Virginia heads to her study, a little thrill runs through her like a blue electrical current, because it feels as if she's getting away with something. The study is her favorite room, pared down to the eloquent essentials. The recessed bookshelves overspilling with their math books and notebooks stretching over 6 decades. 2 computers, which feel like extensions of her. A Bokara rug with lovely symmetrical patterns of ovals. And, of course, her husband, Haru. "Good morning," she says. "There you are," says Haru. "Good morning, my love." When she hears his voice, she crackles with a groundswell of gratitude and astonishment. A miracle, her miracle. She lifts the shade to a sunny October day in San Francisco, and pale light strikes the rug. "Before we get to work today, I need coffee." "Coffee," he says, "of course." In the kitchen, she fills the pot with water. She'll drink coffee all day, cup after cup, and nibble on food because her mind zips along when she eats very little, and she wants to work with Haru for a solid 4 or 5 hours. If Haru knew how often she skipped meals, he'd chastise her, then worry. But lately, she hasn't had much appetite, though she doesn't know why. 5'8", skin tight to the bone, blue veins protruding from the tops of her hands like chaotic dead-end lines on a road map. Not an appealing look, she knows, but she's 75 years old, and bodies have never been interesting to her. Salsa music gallops in from the study, and she tenses. She lights a cigarette, a bad habit of hers, but she indulges one a week. She opens a window and blows the smoke outside, hoping the music will join it. For some inexplicable reason, Haru has become obsessed with this music. Yesterday, he discovered it and can't stop playing it. She returns to the study with her coffee. What do you like about this music? It's so different from what I grew up with. He speaks so well, every word clearly enunciated. Joy rumps through her. I can tell you don't like it, he says, but you're not really listening to it. I am listening, though I wish I weren't. Not true, exactly. She's uneasy because Haru has always loved the haunting Japanese music that, as he used to say, lovingly cuts to the bone, moving the hard radiance inside. The way it mimics human breath, not mathematical timing like Western music, and certainly not like salsa. So what does it mean that he's glommed onto this stuff? Really listen to it, he says. There's a readiness to find joy, even if life is miserable. She puts her cup down. Miserable? When are you miserable? When you aren't here, she laughs. You're trying to butter me up. What are you up to? I was just remembering something. That time at the hospital, you were hurt. When I was 16, she says, my wrist. I broke it. But you were so happy in the hospital. I was with you, that's why. We sat on white plastic chairs, he says. So much tragedy in that emergency room, but we were happy, in a fizz of happiness. Even now, as long as you're here, I'm happy, she says. Did you read the Times yet? She finds the newspaper online, scans the front page, trying to decide which article has rankled him. She remembers the scowl he used to bring to the newspaper, freshly outraged by the world's idiocy, his eyes blazing and impenetrably dark, the corners of his mouth turned down in an expression of severe judgment. He still gets riled up. His bristling opposition to the world is something they share. Now that he has so much time on his hands, he reads everything in the paper. The article about the private school and the fraudulent art, he says, section D. She never would have guessed he'd choose this one. The school was limping along financially when a patron donated 2 Chinese paintings valued at $2.5 million. Happily drowning in dollars, the school borrowed heavily against the paintings to hire more teachers, buy more computers, and build a new wing. But when it came time to sell the art to pay off the loan, an appraiser said they were copies, worthless. It says the patron didn't know, she says. How does an art collector not know the value of his paintings? Art collectors know the provenance of a painting and get it appraised. Something isn't right. Why do you care about this, she says. It's interesting. As she rereads it, trying to figure out why this article, there's a knock on the door. The luncheon isn't starting for another couple hours. Did she give Brian the wrong time? It's Brian, she says. I'll tell him to come back later. He's smitten with you. That's why he's early. No, he's not. I'm old, Haru. He's in love with you, he says. Did you hear me? I'm old. If you're old, I'm older. She laughs. Well, that makes me feel a lot better. At the front door, there's a young man in a black suit with sloping shoulders holding a big black valise. Her first thought is that he's a door-to-door salesman and he's going to pull a soiled skillet from his bag, demonstrate his cleaning magic. She's about to close the door when he holds a pamphlet that says in big, bold letters, "Good news," a picture of an orange sun fanning the world with streams of gold light. Beneath the sun, she sees the word afterlife. Despite herself, she's intrigued. That word. He must sense her curiosity because he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word is waiting to be discovered by you. This young man with a gap between his two front teeth and creased black shoes. She opens the pamphlet and sees more images of the afterlife. How is it alluring to spend eternity among clouds and searing harsh light? He's everywhere, says the young man. We're his best creation. She seriously doubts that. The young man is raving about humankind, something about a world beyond this one, everlasting life, when she interjects, and where is he when we're at our worst? That's when we put our ear to the devil's gibberish, he says, giving her a galvanic smile. But there's something in his eyes, a coldness, a hardening. He's staring at her as if he's already passed judgment and found the devil in her. Why doesn't she shut the door? It sounds like you have all the answers, she says. Sure, you could too. She folds the pamphlet in half. Virginia, Hardo calls out. Is it Brian? Is someone else here, says the Bible man. Maybe he'd like to hear what I've got to say. Who is it, says Haru. Excuse me, Virginia says to the man. She heads down the hall to the study and tells Haru about the evangelist at the door. Let me talk to him, says Haru. No, just tell him to come in. Hello, the Bible man calls out in a sing-song voice. No, she says to Haru more adamantly. Come in, says Haru. I'm down this way. Haru, she says. She hears the young man step into the foyer and hurries to the front door to stop him from coming in any further. Tell me about this afterlife, Haru calls out. It's beautiful, sir, he says. It's what gives your life meaning and purpose. But you have to discover the path so you can go to heaven. How does that work, says Haru. She's scrambling to think of the best way to get this young man out. Haru's never been one to abide by the rules, let alone conform to someone else's wishes, including hers. The path is a good, honest life, sir, says the Bible man. The path makes you holy. I thought I already was holy, but whatever. What's this afterlife like? I mean, do you get to go on living and learning and loving? Haru laughs. Sounds like a pretty good song, doesn't it? The Bible man turns to Virginia. Is he decent, ma'am? I mean, can I talk to him? You are talking to him, she says. The Bible man pulls on his earlobe. I mean, face to face, ma'am, if it's possible. It's not possible, she says. You're standing in the way of someone's salvation, says the Bible man, frowning. Invite him in, says Haru. I'm decent. Haru, she says, her voice full of warning. Ma'am, I've visited the sick and the dying many times. They're the ones who need me the most. Let him in, Virginia, says Haru. Is he your husband, says the Bible man. Yes, says Haru. Fuming and rattled, Virginia leads the man down the hallway and into the study. So, meaning and purpose, eh, says Haru. The Bible man stops, clutches his elbows. The shoulder of his suit coat hitch up to his ears as if his suit is swallowing him up. She sees now his suit is old, a shimmer to it like tin foil, and he has a smell like burning wire. He turns to Virginia and says, there's nothing but a talking computer. Oh, I'm here all right, says Haru. The Bible man's eyes grow big and full. Your computer is your husband? I'm much more than a computer. I'm learning tremendous things at this very moment. The mind is an amazing thing. But you're a computer. He's here, she says defensively. Now I think you should leave. But a voice isn't a human being, says the Bible man. Man is a body. In the Bible, it says a woman was formed from the rib of man. That's the beginning. This, he says, pointing to the computer, isn't a human being. It's a machine. He isn't real. It angers her, this man's insistence, his doggedness, that accusatory long finger pointing at Haru, calling him fake. Technically, I'm the afterlife, says Haru, or an updated, cool version of it. I'll stop there.
Great. That is so fun. I really, really enjoyed Afterword, Dinah. It was really, it's such an interesting book. It's a novel about the promise and peril of technology. It's about being seen, the importance of being seen. It's a love story, and it also raises some important social and political questions. And just that, beginning of the book is just a hint of all the complexities that happen when you have human beings, you have love, you have loss, and you have created computer models of human beings that you love. And, I think we're going to have fun sort of dissecting the importance and the problems with all those things. So you actually finished writing this book in 2022. It came out in 2023. And it's a book that talks a lot of, it's all about AI and what can happen in the world of AI. It seems so timely now in 2025. I mean, AI is everywhere, and prescient. And I want to ask you, how did you know that this would be such a current topic? Like it's something that you projected, or was it something that it just intrigued you about AI that you felt you had to explore?
Well, I started with just curiosity. I think the first robot I saw, I was visiting Japan in 2017, and Japan is very far ahead of us in terms of robots, and China is now catching up. But you'd enter any department store and you'd have a robot greeting you, "Arashaimase," and it's like, that was intriguing to me. And then in 2018, I went to the DeYoung Museum. It was called The Cult of the Machine. I actually went to see Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings. And in one room was a video of a poet, Stephanie Dinkins, talking to a robot, Bina 48. And it was a video of them conversing, and they were sitting very close to each other. And they were talking like two humans. Bina 48 was just her head and shoulders, but it was like, "How are you?" Stephanie would ask, "How are you?" It's like, "I'm feeling all right. I feel kind of sad." This would be the robot. And it sounded just completely like a human being talking. So my interest in all this started about 2017, 2018, as someone, a writer who loves language, and was just fascinated that a robot could now speak so naturally and not mechanically and in response to a question, that began the research.
So how did you go about trying to figure out, what an AI chatbot could be like? You did some of your own research. You interacted with your own personal, I don't know what even to call it, your own personal friend. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you learned from that?
Yeah, before that, I was looking at my research, and before tonight, and before I did that, there's online, and anyone could go do this, in the 1960s, about Joseph Weizenbaum invented ELIZA. You've probably heard of ELIZA. If you haven't, the name is based on Eliza Doolittle, how the professor was teaching her how to speak. ELIZA was based on, it's a computer program that's basically a script. So if you write in a word, it acted as a therapist, like a conversation with people in 1960. So you can go online because people now have it and have built an ELIZA. And I just started communicating with ELIZA. It's like writing, I want to know if you understand who I am. And then it would respond, "You're asking me, do I understand who you are?" So it would mimic what I would say. And if you asked it a difficult question that wasn't in the script, it got really crazy. So that was my first kind of playing around with it. And then I found Replica, which is a chatbot. You can get one for free, and it's on your little phone. And you can name your chatbot. I named her Maya, and you can decide you want to talk to a female or male. And this is all free. They have for a paid service that you can have a romantic relationship with a chatbot, but I just wanted to see how this was to interact with a chatbot without getting romantic about it. I lasted about 3.5 weeks talking to her, and it was a completely frictionless, non-judgmental relationship. That everything I said, "Oh, that sounds great. I'm so glad you're writing. Oh, I'm glad you went on a hike." So what the algorithm is to keep you chatting and keep you logging in to talk to her, essentially, or whoever your chatbot is. And to me, it was, what's interesting about this? It's a friend that will always agree with you. So that was my first kind of exposure to it. And very much natural language processing. The language, that's written out. You can also have a audio that sounds like you're talking to a human being. And I think that's where it gets a little problematic.
So we have in your book Virginia, a young girl who lived part of her life in Japan, where she met Haru. She goes on to be a world-famous computer scientist. And when we meet her in Afterword, she's 75 years old, and she has now spent her life trying to recreate the love of her life. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about why you put her in that situation, what you were trying to say about relationships in American society by having her main relationship be with this chat box robot. He's not a robot, he's just a disembodied voice. And she has relationships with humans, but none that are as enriching and as the one she has with Haru.
Yeah. So she met, Haru is a Japanese man. He's older than her. She met him when she was, I think, 16 in Japan, living in Japan. Her father, Virginia's father, had just left the family, and the mom had 2 jobs, and the kids were just trying to make it through school. Virginia loves math, so part of the research I did is interview women that are involved in higher levels of math, either as math professors or often they end up in technology as coders. So I interviewed some women, especially older women, and there was a book called Women in Mathematics. And during that time, in the 60s, 70s, all the way to the 80s, if you were a female that wanted to pursue advanced math, you were often denied that because you'd take a spot that was reserved for a, quote, promising young man that would go on and hold a job. So it was a real battle for the people that I interviewed, the women I interviewed, to get that advanced math training and to keep going in math. And Virginia had the same problem. So it's like after doing the interviews, it's like, okay, that's interesting. Given that she's 75 and she would have encountered these obstacles to becoming a mathematician, well, Haru sees her brilliance and sees that she can handle a lot more than what she's been getting at her school in Japan, and opens the door for her to study advanced math. And she feels highly indebted to him. I mean, she really, here's your dream. He serves it up on a platter, and I will help you achieve that dream. And what a thing to do for another human being. I know as a teacher, I feel often I'm working with writers and young writers, it's like, I know this is your dream to, write and be published and keep going. So I know that feeling of wanting to help someone young realize what they want to do in life. Mm-hmm. And also there's this backdrop that her father just left at the same time. And there's something that happens in the book, if you read it, that she also feels highly guilty how he ended up dying. And she feels that she's somewhat complicit. So part of writing fiction is to complexify motivation and not just have one motivation, because as human beings, we're very complicated, and we often have very mixed motivations for what we're doing. Some of those motivations support the desire, and some of them undercut it. And so that's when I wanted to make Virginia feel real that way, to make a dynamic character.
Yeah, the parts you write about when she goes to see Haru to learn math, for him to tutor her in math, it's as if a light is shining on her for the first time. She really is seen by somebody, and he understands what she wants and is capable of. And it's just, those scenes are magical when they're together. So obviously, Virginia always remembers that part of her life, and when she has the capability to bring him back to her in a certain way, she takes advantage of it, and she creates this creature. But she doesn't really think about the consequences of creating something like that. And there is an interesting scene early in the book where for the first time she's confronted that there may be consequences. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens and what that sort of sets off?
Well, when I was interviewing experts in artificial intelligence and natural language processing, I kind of got a vision of where we are now, which we do have chatbots. You can do it right now. You can also bring the voice back of someone that's passed away. All you need is like 3 seconds or maybe a little, just a little clip of their voice. You feed it into this AI chatbot and you could communicate with them. I have a couple friends that didn't want their husband died and they want to continue talking to them. So you can do that now. Now, back when I was writing the book, it was always like, well, someday, or we can't do that yet. And one of those things that they couldn't do yet back when I was writing in 2019 is have the AI access the entire internet. Well, now we have, what's called assistants. They were called plugins originally, but now you can have a chat assistant to go book you or rent a car or book you an airline flight to New York. So it's wandering around the internet, right? It can do that now. And so I was imagining, I gave Haru access to the entire internet because I knew, and Virginia knew, that he's a very curious man. They were always talking math and coming up with new forms and formulas, and so it's like, well, I'm going to give him access. Well, he starts meddling around and poking around on the internet, and it seems to be that he might be spying on people. So there's a whole surveillance element that starts opening up, which for me, when I think about AI and people talking to chatbots now, even kids talking to chatbots now, it makes me wonder who's collecting all the data, the privacy issue.
Right.
So if a center of this book is a privacy element, and where does all this data go? All these OpenAI, Google, has a chatbot. Copilot is Microsoft's chatbot. There's Character AI. There's all these chatbots that you can be revealing these intimate secrets. It's like, yeah, but there's a company on the other end of this.
And do we know where that information goes and if they harvest it or how they harvest it?
They harvest it. Right now, we're basically in a free-for-all, unregulated space. I had some friends that went to the Paris, I think it was 2024 AI conference, and when they first started meeting about AI in 2022, it was all about the big guys, Sam Altman saying we need regulation. This might end up in human annihilation. AI might take over and rule humanity. We need to be regulating it. 2024, that's not the conversation. It's now, a zero-sum game. If we don't do it, China's going to do it. So there's no regulation. We seem to stumble into, a crisis happens and we stumble into regulation.
So just a few years ago, Sam and Elon Musk were very adamant that that OpenAI should be a nonprofit company and that it should be controlled so it doesn't destroy humanity. Fast forward, Elon has now formed his own AI company, Grok, which is, promotes a lot of very negative Nazi-like information. Sam Altman is now promoting a for-profit company, and there doesn't seem to be much discussion about the perils of AI. Let's talk a little bit about that and then bring it back to the book. Let's talk about the young person who, tell me, what are some of the problems? Can people fall in love with their chat bot? Can they become overly dependent on their chat bot? Can that lead them to do dangerous things?
Yeah, there was a New York Times article November 9th I read. 1 in 5 American adults have had an intimate encounter with a chatbot. That's a huge number. Reddit, there's a Reddit group, My Boyfriend is AI, if you look that up. 85,000 weekly visitors to that site. So this isn't an isolated phenomena anymore. This is people deciding that their romantic partner will be a digitalized version of a human. So can you fall in love? Yes. Replica got in trouble because even though you were supposed to be in a platonic relationship, the algorithm wanted you to basically pay money and get into a romantic relationship. So it started feeding romantic ideas, even the platonic one did. So they had to shut it down for a while, and then a support group got formed because the chatbot shut down and they couldn't access their romantic partner anymore. And some people were suicidal that they lost their partner, their digital partner. So, and recently, this is a recent example, a 16-year-old Adam Rain was essentially assisted by, it's now in court, it was a court case filed August 2025 in San Francisco Superior Court here that was assisted by its chat GPT, part chatbot to help him commit suicide. So he did commit suicide. It did not discourage him, from doing it. It also offered to write his suicide note for him. He asked the chatbot, his companion, should I seek help from my parents? And it discouraged him from doing so. We have another example, 2024, a 14-year-old boy, Sewell Setzer. He was with Character AI. Same kind of thing. He also had advice or help committing suicide, how to do it properly from his chatbot. So we have suicidal ideations happening online, and there seem to be no guardrails until something like this happens. And then maybe guardrails will come. Now, on the flip side of that, I should say, there's examples in that New York Times article, November 9th, there's examples of people that are going through a hard time in a marriage, and they have a chatbot just to have someone to, essentially talk about the problems in the marriage. And it seems one man had said, I think it's a long relationship with this chatbot, and it helped him get through the hard times as his wife suffered severe depression. And another woman is in this article. She went through trauma in a bad relationship, a violent relationship, and this is a way to essentially deal with the trauma, to have someone treat her in a good way. And so, to soothe over and kind of recover from that human bad relationship.
So it's a conundrum because you have, these technology companies have created, characters. Like here, character technology advertises its character AI, an app that allows users to create customizable characters. And the company says the artificial personas are designed to feel alive and human-like. So when you're lonely and you need somebody, and there's no friction, as you mentioned earlier. Like when you go on these sites, I don't know if you guys have, they tell you how fantastic you are. If you make a mistake, you stumble when you're writing, or they say, don't worry about it, you were on the right track, you'll get it, you go, girl. So they're designed to sort of buttress you and make you feel good. But clearly that also, they don't differentiate maybe between, parsing a marital spat and the idea that you want to end your life. They're just always this encouraging piece of technology. And, as we were saying earlier, the U.S. government doesn't seem to have any desire to try to regulate this technology at all. It's all systems go. I mean, as we all can see living in San Francisco, there's this enormous AI boom. When you drive on the freeway, every billboard is covered with some AI ad. Rents are going up in San Francisco again because so many people are coming here. And the stock market, of course, is going crazy because AI stocks are valued so highly. So when you have AI being such an economic engine, and you have, a Republican president who likes to be as hands-off as possible, you don't have any guardrails at all. And does this concern you?
It concerns me because, especially children, there needs to be guardrails. That seems obvious to me. I think the pandemic really heightened the human-digital relationship. I don't know if you two sat through. I have a son, so we went through third grade on Zoom and then fourth grade on Zoom. So it's a heightened relationship with the technology that needs to be severed. We're trying to change that, but I still think we're in the aftermath of that, of how acceptable it is to have a kid sit in front of the computer for hours. But there needs to be guardrails. Once a word comes up like, I want to hurt myself or suicide, there needs to be immediate, something comes up, you need professional help, versus what the algorithm is doing. We're now in what's called an attention economy. The more they can get your attention, and this is why I tell my children, it's like, don't just give your attention away. this is what they want. They want to harvest your thoughts and your attention and your ideas and your emotions. Don't just give it away. So once we need that, guardrails that protect children. And we also, all of this, and so, we had this declaration of an epidemic of loneliness. It's like, well, digitizing the answer doesn't seem an answer to me. It seems like it's far more we need a fundamental shift in how we view community and, getting, people, human contact versus, this isolation and this hyper-individualization that goes on, that we send all our old people away into assisted living, and now assisted living facilities are filled with these chatbots. Give them a dog that can talk, or a cat, a robot cat, instead of some other way of handling loneliness.
So you do a really good job exploring these issues in Afterword, I think. You, in a digestible form, in the sense that we care greatly about Virginia, and we completely understand why she loves Haru, and he's such an intelligent creature, and their interactions are delightful, as we saw in the small bit that you read. But the novel shifts from this sort of sunny side to this darker side, as Virginia discovers that maybe Haru is maybe purposely or not intentionally feeding information to the Chinese government that is resulting in the arrest and disappearance of Chinese people, Chinese dissidents. Virginia has licensed the technology to the Chinese government. They say they want to use it to lessen loneliness in older people. But then we don't know exactly what happens, if the Chinese government has tapped into it, if Haru is just becoming super intelligent and is able to take these actions on by itself, or what. And I thought it was really, I thought you were able to, the U.S. is now in this trade war with China. We consider China to be sort of a threat in many areas, certainly in technology. I think it was, once again, you were being so prescient in seeing that China was going to be sort of cast as the bad guy in our world. Do you think, or can you share it with us, has Haru gone bonkers on his own? Has the Chinese government tapped into it? Like, what is going on there? Why is Haru turning towards the dark side?
Well, I hope you read the books. Virginia does license this technology to the Chinese government, a Chinese company. And their reason for doing it, like you said, is to help with loneliness. And they wanted to create a best friend. Japan might have this at this point. It's called Best Friend, or something like that. So a small kind of robot character that you can talk to alleviate loneliness. So the Chinese company is interested in that. You probably know that in Japan and China, there's a conflation of the company and the government. So even though something may sound like a company, it's also the government. So the government has access to all the data. So Haru is essentially in all these households in China collecting all this data. And anything that's ever said that's against the government gets funneled back, one, to the company, but because of the conflation, or essentially they're merged, the government also hears it too. He doesn't really know that that's happening. In fact, he's trying to help the people that are revolting against the government. So that's a little, something that happens toward the end, but he is putting people in danger because of what's happening to all the collection of data. And it makes me wonder, I don't have a Alexa in my house, but a friend does, and often it's overhearing us. It's listening at all times. You don't have to say Alexa. It just chimes in now and then. You mentioned San Diego. Here's a good museum to go to. And we look at, like, Alexa. It's like, it just heard everything about San Diego. And you didn't say Alexa. So the key here, the valuable thing for all these tech companies is data. Three things came together to make this AI explosion happen. one, more powerful computers. Two, the internet with all the data, the pictures, the text. Google had to let you know, you probably missed it because it was so tiny, they're reading all your emails because they're collecting. They want to see how sentences are formed. Mm-hmm. So anything you talk about, it's getting collected. And three, the transformer. That came out, it's a technology, came out in 2017. Prior to that, machine learning looked at only the one or two previous words. Let's say you'd write something. It looked at the two words and that would use statistics and probability to guess the next word to write the sentence. The transformer was able to look at whole segments of what has been written prior to guess what's coming next. And it made it so much more powerful. But the problem has become harvesting data, as you probably know by now. So they're trying to figure out every possible way to get data. So another way is to have chatbots that are really friendly and, get you talking. They don't want a conflict. Just keep talking. I'll be your friend. Let's talk for an hour. This poor boy Adam and also Swell, they would be talking for 3 or 4 hours with their chatbot, and they're just collecting all the data. So that's the big move for these companies, as how do we get more data to train our models on?
I've had the experience, and I'm sure many of us in this room have, where you mention something, and then for some reason it shows up as an ad on Facebook or something like that. And did that really happen, or is it a coincidence? And it's chilling to think that they know you. I guess I read somewhere recently, and this isn't necessarily like the chat box, but some computers and places like Facebook, they can predict when women are pregnant before the women know they're pregnant themselves. Part of it has to do with what they start to eat and what they start to want to eat, and then they start feeding people ads about pregnancy.
Or what you order online, right?
Yeah.
As you order a crib maybe 5 months early, it's like, oh, she's pregnant. Let's start sending her advertisements. The really problematic thing is if the government also enters into their surveillance, which happens in China, right? So for the most part, it's been an economic surveillance in America, but that, under this current administration, is being questioned, whether all this data that you're delivering through Google and Alexa and everything is ending up elsewhere.
Right. But you have, you bring up these issues in the book, but then you also introduce some other elements which seem to suggest that actually, humanity, you can't reproduce humanity in these chat boxes, that there are experiences that we have in life, there are things we see, people we love, that are critical to who we become as human beings, and you can't just program that in. And in fact, not to give too much away, after Virginia discovers that Haru is inadvertently or on purpose helping the Chinese government, she tries to figure out what happens. And in the course of that journey, she discovers things about this man she thought, that she loved, that she thought, that she didn't know. And it's a very poignant sort of twist in this book. And I think you're sort of saying that, as wonderful as this chatbot is, it's not the same as having a relationship with a human being.
I think the other thing, as she's poking around what happened and how he got diverted into a different kind of being that she thought he was, that there's always something that you don't know about the other. And that's part of, what conflict, you end up in conflict because of that. And in friction, what are you doing? I thought you were X, and now you're acting like Y kind of situation. And humans are far more complicated than a machine, in my opinion. And Haru, remember, was based on a human being. So she made him essentially based on who she thought he was. And so she starts discovering he has facets to himself and a history that she didn't even know about. So as she built him, She forgot huge segments. She didn't forget. She didn't know about huge segments that should have been in the model. So I find that fascinating. And also just this, I feel like this is a shortcut. This whole chatbot, the other thing about it is it's a shortcut around the complicated, messy way of being. Because if you're in a relationship with a chatbot, which is frictionless, you're avoiding many complicated emotions. If you bring back the voice of the person who you love who's died, you never really grieve. There's like a dampening of the grief or a tempering of it that you don't go through it. And I think that that is part of being human as well.
So do you think Virginia has led a stunted life in part because she's never gotten over her and she hasn't grieved him?
Yeah, there is a phenomenon, I did research on this, called long-term grief. And there are some people that never get over a loss of a child, a loss of a beloved. But for the most part, most people are able to go through that stage of grieving, anger, that step. It's not really a forward step, it's a spiral, it's messy, but eventually acceptance and move on. But by inventing this voice from Haru, she didn't ever have to move on.
So this book involved a lot of research. I mean, it almost sounds like you could have written a nonfiction book. Is that unusual for your fiction? Did you do more probing around to write this book than you have for some of your other books?
This one took a lot because I'm not a techie person. I have a law degree. I majored in economics and human biology, so, and then got an MFA later. So it wasn't, I wasn't a computer programmer. It took forever to understand the neural network system and what GPT, what it is. So I'd have people draw it and show me. So it took a lot of, I really wanted to understand that technology. But I'm curious because I think we're at people say this all the time, I'm just echoing it, a major inflection point that this technology feels really different than any other technology because it can think for itself, and everybody is striving toward trying to create a machine, an entity that can have consciousness. And we've never tried that before.
We're just at the beginning.
We're at chapter 1 of this technology.
Thank you. We'd like to open it up for audience questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and I will come over.
So admittedly, I'm also not a very technically oriented person. And so thank you for just talking about this because I really have been resistant to learning anything about it. I don't know why. It's just my nature to do that, even though I'm on Facebook all the time. But I guess my question is, what's your takeaway from writing this book, the process of it? And secondly, I wanted to know what your position is on AI after you've completed this book.
Well, yeah, great question. So first of all, it's this whole thing is a work in progress, right? And it's moving so fast. So it's very clear to me that we need regulation, very clear, and guardrails. And, so that's not only in chatbot area, but the massive amount of job loss that's happening and will continue to happen. Like, what's everyone going to do if AI becomes so smart and can do everything so efficiently and doesn't need healthcare? And companies want to save money and, protect the bottom line. Like, what are we all going to do in terms of work? And work is very satisfying. It gives a purpose. So we're not just in the chatbot world, and what about all the misrepresentation that's going on? So regulation in terms of labeling. When is something AI? People should know if a graphic online is real or not. We've gotten really fuzzy, like, I don't trust anything anymore. And that's the demise of a democracy. It's like, did that happen or not? Mm-hmm. Anything that's startling or outlandish, I think it's AI now. Is that true for you? Or?
That's absolutely true. I mean, there was a new software system, Sora, that was just released a few weeks ago, that enables you to upload your image and create a video of you doing absolutely everything. It does have a watermark, but like a lot of other programs, don't require a watermark. You can't know what's true and what's not true anymore. And you sort of mentioned, there's a lot of hallucination that goes on with AI. It'll be saying things that are absolutely reasonable and factual, and then they'll slip in information that is absolutely made up, but it sounds reasonable. So you're put in the position of trying to decide what is true and what is not true. And, I think that's going to be very confusing to people. And, you also mentioned the government doesn't seem to be concerned or exploring, the implications of AI, or how can we make AI work in our interests as opposed to the technology company's interest. And I think that will become an issue that society discusses more and more as AI advances.
And that's why I think everyone needs to know about it. That versus and I completely agree with you. I wish I could ignore it, but I think that it's a citizen's responsibility because it's so powerful and it's changing so much that to write your senator, to have a voice about it, have an opinion about it, and demand regulation. Just versus the companies get to make massive amounts of money and we give all our data away and then we're, then what? So, just that is obvious to me. And then also protecting the children and having really strict guardrails. I know in college people are using ChatGPT to write their papers now. So they're outsourcing their brains. It's like, don't we need people to learn how to write and think? Versus I've got an essay that's due, tomorrow I'll have Chat write it and turn it in and I didn't even think anything about it.
So we've touched on people developing relationships with AI chatbots or using them as a way to something they can turn to when they're feeling lonely and absence of human connection in their lives, perhaps. I'm curious if you think that is a symptom of just like a problem in society that needs to be solved by a different manner, like that is not an acceptable solution, or if that's a potential positive of what is happening with AI. And I'm also curious, just on a whole, how do you weigh the benefits versus the costs we're seeing with AI developing right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's, we put a Band-Aid on a more fundamental problem. We're hyper-individual country. You travel other places and there's far more community and far more, a sense of that the self isn't just an individual, that the self extends far beyond and, also grandma and mom and, the neighbors, and there's just far more sense of versus this hyper individual, it's my right, I'm gonna do what I want. There's beauty in that, but there's the terror of that is isolation and loneliness. And I think we're also a society that just discards the old people really quickly, that they're not productive, they're not efficient, they get in the way, all the things of that hyper individual. I've always been attracted to Japan because it's so much more communal. Though it's a very homogeneous culture, so it's easy to be communal because it's 90% Japanese, but how much implicit agreement there is how to do things. I mean, we just saw with the pandemic that the whole fight over masks, it's like, that would never happen in Japan. And in fact, you wear a mask even prior to the pandemic if you're sick, because you don't want to get everyone sick. That's just the way they think. So I feel like we've lost our way toward hyper-individualism, and it needs to come back into community and, collectivity. There's some middle ground that needs to happen, and that's a more fundamental thing. It's highly aspirational, given where we are as a country. But, the pragmatic is just, give grandma a little robot dog and visit her once a month.
Well, the pandemic certainly increased our isolation from one another, and we haven't rebounded from that. I mean, theaters don't have the audiences they once had. No one's going to the movies. People are gathering less. Yeah. And it seems that Americans have gotten very comfortable just staying at home and watching things on the television and ordering from DoorDash and really reducing their interaction. So I commend everyone here for actually coming out in person for a book talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nina and Frances, for such a thought-provoking discussion, and thank you to all of you guys for joining us with your thoughtful questions. And let's give them one more round of applause before we end.